If you are a Crusader Kings 3 enjoyer, then you've almost certainly heard of Chapter 3. And I've got to say, I won't waste your time in this video. It looks amazing for a couple reasons that I'll expand on, but like any set of DLC, it's got some things that do worry me. That being said, the positives for this announcement vastly outweigh the potential negatives, and if you want a TLDR, I'm very much looking forward to this chapter just based on its concepts alone. This video is going to cover a quick summary of what each DLC is, alongside some thoughts and ideas I have on what we might see in the DLC, and what we likely won't. This video is mostly speculation, but it's also something of an analysis for me, as we're trying to get an idea of exactly how ambitious Paradox really wants to get. I hope you enjoy. So let's first talk about the surprisingly soon-to-release Legends of the Dead. First of all, bravo Paradox, this DLC is actually coming out in a timely manner. Look, I'm always the guy that wants a delay in return for higher quality, but if Paradox wants to give it early, I'm completely happy to see it. My first note about this DLC is that the concept, to me, is absolutely genius just from a design perspective. See, I've often felt that with the explicit exception of tours and tournaments, CK3 has suffered from issues of lacking ambition and creativity mechanically. To have the unifying idea of this DLC be something spreading on the map is quite interesting. In a way, diseases and stories both spread between people and evolve and mutate as they spread. I'd never even thought of those two things as being related until this DLC was announced, and I love it. Obviously, the threat of diseases as a mechanic is something I can only see being interesting to combat. Choosing to keep your family locked up in the castle or risk the harm of a plague is a classic sort of mechanical choice from CK2, and with luck we'll see it expanded upon. Alongside that, having dynamically named diseases adds to the RP. Speaking of RP, that's what gets my interest with regards to Legends. See, it's my belief that RP is king over mechanics, and particularly Crusader Kings 3. This is not the case in most grand strategy games, but CK3 stands unique in this aspect, and I love that Paradox has been leaning into that aspect of the game. This doesn't mean that actual mechanics are unimportant though. RP is only meaningful when the choices that are presented have meaningful effects, and this is where I'm hoping Legends will be something better than Court Grandeur. Ask yourself this: when deciding your court amenities, what factors go into the decision? Well, my answer to that is none at all. It will always either be max amenities if I can afford it, or no amenities if money is more important. There was never a roleplay aspect to it, and that kinda sucks. Court Grandeur was a money sink for some bonuses, and that's all. Legends, though, if they can do a little more than just give some prestige and renown, could be amazing. I've already heard some people make the CK2 Bloodline comparison, and Bloodlines were so fun because of their ability to actually unlock mechanics, whether active or passive. There was a Bloodline in CK2 to let you obfuscate crimes, I think it was called, and it let you erase modifiers like known murderer or kinslayer for some prestige. And that was super cool as a reward because it changed the way that you play the game. I want Legends to do something akin to that for CK3, but not every Legend. We see in a teaser a couple Legends, and I think it's entirely valid to have some be more valuable or detrimental than others, with some maybe just being simply bonus prestige, but others should be something crazy, like getting an extra invasion per lifetime, or adding effects similar to cultural traditions. Now, I don't have a ton of specific examples aside from what I've already given, but my point is that I think there ought to be some Legends that are simple, and others that are complex, with the complex ones requiring more upkeep. This is where I want to also talk about the ability to modify Legends. It was mentioned in the teaser that over time a character can modify things in the legend, with the example of a hunting legend adding in that a dragon is slain. This to me is a wonderful addition for RP alone, but this really should have a meaningful mechanical addition. If the story becomes grander, its maintenance should go up, as should its effects, but I assume that's already in consideration. No, I actually want to talk about the influence of other characters on Legends. This is something I think would be really cool. What if I as a character could challenge a legend's veracity and potentially alter someone else's legend to make it worse? Maybe this could be limited to rivals or something, but do some kind of event chain where you investigate the story and find evidence to disprove certain aspects of the story. Imagine a story of some ancestor slaying a dragon, but then I go and find the supposed lair of this dragon and prove that a bear lived there, not a dragon. I could use that evidence to discredit the legend, with the other character having to restore the legend's reputation by doing some investigation of their own. The antagonism between characters over their stories of their families, I think, would be quite fun to explore, but I also wouldn't be surprised if this isn't in the game, since it would be quite complicated. To be frank with you, I'm quite happy with how ambitious this sounds already, so this addition I'm making is coming from a place of curiosity and wonder, not critique. With that, I want to talk about plagues now, and this is where I'm hoping that some of what I'm saying does get implemented. Recent years have given many people a somewhat basic understanding of introductory epidemiology, I'd say, with most people, hopefully, realizing that diseases spread in many, sometimes undetectable ways. That's why we wash our hands and sanitize more often than ever. I want CK3 to have some very creative ways to spread diseases. I do believe it was mentioned in the teaser that armies and characters can spread diseases, but I wonder, is this going to be simulated through events or actual map movements? I would love to be a total asshole and raise my army during a plague to march it over to somewhere else and spread my disease. The only problem is that since there's no concept of military access in the game, I could get a disease in Ireland, raise an army, and sail to Constantinople to destroy it with plague. That's probably not good for the game. I don't have a succinct answer to that though, as it is ultimately true that yes, if a boat of infected men were to sail to Constantinople, it certainly would spread the plague. The only thing I can think of would be to disincentivize spreading the plague, which is where we talk about how plagues are named and assigned to characters. I think that if a name is assigned to a plague, the name should be based on some particular thing. It could be an individual character, it could be a culture, it could be a faith, among other options. The more a plague spreads, the more it should negatively affect that particular thing to which it's tied. If a plague is tied to a character and that character is you wouldn't actually want to spread that plague to the Byzantines because now Steve's pox or whatever is going to reach international fame with the blame squarely on you. The same goes for if your culture is associated with that plague. If all Europe is ravaged by the French consumption, you can expect your cultural acceptance to go down and trade routes to close, affecting taxes and development in the region on top of the already negative effects of the plague. I don't have perfect answers for what these penalties ought to be, but the penalties nonetheless must exist, so as to prevent a player just kinda deciding they want the world to drown in plague and having no reason to not do so. The penalties will also likely tie into the new legitimacy mechanic, which I suspect is going to be part of a free patch due to not being mentioned in the store page for the DLC. Legitimacy to me appears to solve the potential issue of this DLC leaning into roleplay too much, not that I have a problem with that. I just know that some people really want more grounded mechanics alongside their RP, so legitimacy is appreciated. Will it be another court grandeur number? I actually think not. Legitimacy from how it was described in the teaser seems to be a number which changes based on your decisions on how to act, alongside presumably other factors like diseases and legends. I like this a lot. Tyranny as a number is pretty bare bones, but adding in other penalties like low legitimacy will make tyranny more painful, while also incentivizing getting better legends in order to maintain legitimacy despite tyranny. I like it a lot actually, and I think it'll do a great job of increasing the strategic complexity of CK3. Sometimes, CK3 can feel like a solved game, at least strategically, and having some new mechanics to consider for your tactics and strategies will only be a positive for the game. Since this DLC is so vast in content, I'm actually still not done, as we're going to talk about legendary buildings now, the section of the DLC with the least information. From what I understand, it's a system where characters with high-level legends can create a new holding slot in a barony, which can hold the legendary building. To me, this will either be a mechanically important feature, or an RP one, but optimally both. CK2 has the Great Works, which were absolute trash mechanically, but amazing RP-wise. I suspect this will not be a Great Work type of mechanic with lots of customization, useless modifiers, but rather the opposite. I think it'll be much more limiting with the RP, but provide some actual tangible benefits. Hey, I'm happy to be wrong. I would love for something like Imperator's Great Works to come in with actual useful modifiers alongside customization. That being said, we just don't know much about it, so time will tell. There's a new court position called the Court Chronicler, and I assume this will be something simple. You appoint a guy to write your stuff, and it just makes your legends decay more slowly or something. What would be cool would be if different aptitude levels changed how much of a legend you could alter, or what sorts of legends you could write, but I get the feeling it would just be a modifier on its spread rate or something. Last thing I'll talk about with this DLC is how legends spread. We don't know how these things will spread, but we can see some examples on the Steam page and in the teaser. I'm going to assume that it'll be based on your court positions like Musician and the Chronicler, alongside the opinions of lords in the regions where the legend is spreading. If the lord likes you, they perpetuate your story on your behalf, and if not, they squash it in its tracks. I would like it if, as legends spread, they were altered by the people spreading them, since that's the inherent nature of stories that travel far and wide. A smaller, more centralized legend has an easier narrative to control, but is less prestigious since it's not so common a story, and widespread legends are the inverse of that. I'd almost like to see a character be able to integrate themselves into someone else's legend to sap some of its power for themselves, similar to what I mentioned before about rivals besmirching a story. If a story from the Byzantine Empire spreads to Bulgaria, the Bulgarian king might want to get in on the legend and mention that during the dragon hunt, the sword used to slay it was actually created by a Bulgarian blacksmith. This would be different than a rival besmirching your story, as it wouldn't reduce the level of the legend but instead just give a minor reward to the Bulgarian king and increase the legend's presence in Bulgaria. This would mean the Bulgarian king would be actively helping the Byzantine Emperor's story get more traction, but also benefiting from it minorly. That way it actually builds friendly relations and power for each of them. I would also assume that legends can't overlap, so will we see some kind of legend competition? I'm not sure. My assumption could also be wrong, and legends can overlap. We'll see. I'm not sure how you'd have legends compete for control in a region. In CK2, diseases could overlap, so you could have a county being ravaged by smallpox and consumption, and I assume the same will be true for CK3's diseases. Whether legends will also fall into that camp is unknown, but I don't see why two legends couldn't coexist in one county. Beyond that, the Steam page mentions funeral rites, which is cool for RP, but I imagine won't be huge mechanically. They could go the grand wedding route of it, making it a huge money sink with huge rewards, or it could be like a sky burial, a bit of money for a bit of prestige and piety. I'm honestly quite excited for this DLC. I don't expect that all of my little ideas will make their way in, nor would I be unhappy if they don't. Like I said before, I'm just exploring some thoughts. These are not criticisms, especially given the DLC isn't even out yet. Legends of the Dead is the DLC we know the most about, and it's coming out in less than a month, March 4th. You bet I'll be checking it out the moment it comes out, and fingers crossed, early, if I can snag myself early access. Let's talk about the next DLC in the chapter, Roads to Power. Roads to Power is the big boy massive expansion of the year, and it sure does look big. It shares the ambition of Legends of the Dead, implementing significant new ways to play the game, including being an unlanded adventurer and a competitive governor system which resembles Imperator. I'm not going to lie, as a recent Imperator convert, thanks to the Invictus mod, nicely done guys, I am quite happy to see more seemingly Imperator-inspired ideas coming through. We saw some information on this DLC in the teaser, but it was certainly not as much Legends of the Dead, which leaves more space for speculation. How fun. Let's first talk about unlanded characters. Obviously, this is revolutionary, whether it gets fleshed out or not, but it seems like it will be fleshed out. I would be quite happy just to be able to hit start game with El Cid, but it looks like adventuring characters will have their own style of play, with contracts and quests almost. This to me is similar to adventure mode in Dwarf Fortress compared to Fortress mode. I don't know if I've got any Dwarf Fortress enjoyers here, so for a quick summary, in Dwarf Fortress, the main game is a colony sim about building a fortress for dwarfs. But there's an alternate mode where you play as one individual dwarf and just adventure around the pre-generated world, including potentially the fortress you've made. This is where I get excited, but it'll depend on one particular decision that Paradox will have to make. It's already been confirmed that if you lose all your landed titles, you will no longer game over, and instead will become an adventurer. But what about deposing? It's a common tactic in CK3, at least for speedrunning, to intentionally depose yourself by losing a tier in your to trigger a succession. In the current game, your old character remains alive and basically becomes a courtier. But would it be possible to depose and intentionally become an adventurer, leaving the throne to your heir early? That would be awesome. Alternatively, could I, at any point, maybe with some kind of escalating price based on realm size, just decide to abandon my realm to become an adventurer? Basically, my question boils down to, is it possible to, and if so, how does a person become an adventurer outside of starting as one or losing all titles? I would accept it if it were only possible to become an adventurer via losing all titles or starting as one. Fine. I would be ecstatic if it were possible to, on a whim, go adventuring, maybe tie it to a culture tradition. For example, I think it would be very appropriate for a Norse character who is, let's say, lower than King tier, to Varangian adventure, but not in the way that's in the game currently, instead choosing to become unlanded and go to Constantinople like a Varangian. But would it be so appropriate for a Frenchman to do that? Perhaps not. I think it would also be appropriate for any culture with the culture traditions, Swords for Hire, or Diasporic, or others like that, to become an adventurer at any time, again maybe excluding kings and up. See, I'm willing to compromise. My perfect world would be to become an adventurer at any time with increasing penalties based on your realm size and rank, but sure, let's limit it to dukes and below and certain cultures, alongside the already confirmed losing all titles method. That would be absolutely insane, both for roleplay and for actual strategy. It would also be great for simulating the historical events of cultures like the steppe nomad people, who often got their start as mercenaries before settling down, which I demonstrated using a custom character in a recent GigaChat story video as an Allen mercenary. Beyond that, we don't have any details about how contracts will work. From what I can guess, we accomplish tasks for our liege in return for rewards. While I'm of course interested in that system from the perspective of the adventurer, this also begs the question of what I as a liege could use an adventurer for. What tasks am I accomplishing as an adventurer, and how is that affecting the world? Can I be someone instrumental in my liege's realm by doing all their dirty work? Can I sabotage a job to screw over my liege and defect to the enemy? There are all kinds of possibilities that we just don't have any details on to possibly speculate realistically about. Ultimately, the worst case is that contracts are unimpactful money, prestige, piety, and fame generators for adventurers, and that would be disappointing, but not such a strong way to ruin the idea of landless adventuring. See, this is what I like about this DLC. It's ambitious enough that it could actually choose to play somewhat safe with its details, and off of its concepts alone still be fun and interesting. That being said, I'm of course hoping for more detail, not less. The other thing to wonder about is how one decides to settle as an adventurer. Can I conquer someone else with soldiers I've hired with my adventuring money? Can I ask my liege for payment in the form of land? Can I ask a dynasty member to give me a title? Where can I settle? Such questions are beyond answer until more details come. That brings us to the other major feature of this DLC, which is the administrative government of the Byzantines. This seems to be a Byzantine-only feature based on the often corrupt Byzantine bureaucracy, which is certainly cool and very much wanted by the community, as the Byzantiboos have been getting their way in EU4 and now they want their way in CK3. In concept, I like the system, but I'm curious what it's tied to. Is it tied to the Byzantine Empire title? Is it tied to the Eastern Roman legacy culture? Is it tied to Greek specifically or something? The reason I ask is because I'm curious if every realm which holds a Byzantine Empire would suddenly have these systems attached to them. I think the best solution is a new government type. But then the question becomes whether only the Byzantines on Game Start have it, if they can abolish it, and if other empires can implement it. My best case scenario there is that the Byzantines, Seljuks, and Abbasids should start with it, since they're all empires, and it should be both abolishable and implementable for any empire to your realm. I'd understand that given this is being advertised as a Byzantine mechanic, if this mechanic were stuck to just the Byzantine Empire and not obtainable by anyone else, I wouldn't have a right to complain. I just think it's always nice to have any given mechanic also function for other parts of the world, not just one. Having the new government type would also incentivize making empires outside of the additional domain size and vassal limit. Often in my casual games in CK3, I never make empires because they are boring. Suddenly, you don't have like 6 kingdoms that split on succession, you just have the one big title with king vassals that you ally and it gets boring. It'd be cool to have this new mechanic for all empires, which makes empires feel like an actual step above a kingdom. It would also make it so that every rank has an actual meaningful mechanic change as a step up from the previous one. Count to Duke unlocks having vassals. Duke to King unlocks the royal court. King to Emperor unlocks governors of the influence system, which is the next part of this DLC. Influence is clearly tied into the administrative government, and it's a new way to measure power from what I can tell. Obvious questions are what I can do with influence, how do I get it, can I interfere in Morale's attempts at influence, can I help my friends gain influence. I assume you get it by having counselor positions, being a knight, holding a minor title, and other such things that would simulate influence in a realm reasonably. I assume you can spend influence on gaining land as a viceroyalty, that is, a temporary position like in CK2. You can thus collect taxes from that land used to further your interests, maybe trying to gain more influence so as to maintain your gubernatorial position, or to maybe get that land turned into your own personal domain. I'd very much like it if I could use influence to get things other than land though. I'd like to use my influence to make the Emperor do things like declare wars or favor heirs that I want. I'd like to use influence to gain a hook on whatever I want, or just directly spend the influence on hook-like interactions such as marriages. I'd also like to use influence to build up my family's entrenchment in the bureaucracy, like promised minor titles that always go to anyone in my family. This could also tie into the family estate, which is reminiscent of the CK2 Republic mechanic of having your little house that's not in any particular county, and which gives huge bonuses if you invest a ton in it, alongside your ability to control the Republic directly. The family estate to me ought to basically just be the exact system ripped directly out of CK2. It was good in that game, it'll be good in this one. The question is what the buildings can do, how expensive they'd be, and whether it's exclusive to these Byzantine government systems. I think it would be entirely reasonable to restrict it to just the Byzantine government and let the effects of the buildings be mostly numerical. Buildings which generate influence and wealth to help achieve my goals within the Empire would be great, but I only fear that investing heavily in this home estate would suck if you lose all of its effects upon becoming a permanent lord, which I assume a person does eventually transition to. You could either just refund the gold spent on the family estate, accept that the money is gone, or keep the family estate even as a landed character, but have some of its effects be useless, like the influence, which I assume properly landed lords do not benefit from. The last major mechanic with this DLC seems to be the co-king system of the Byzantine Empire. I'm just gonna say it, please let any realm have a co-ruler. I find the idea of co-rulers so fun to mess with, and if you want to restrict it to just empires, that's fine, but don't just let it be Byzantine only. Lots of kingdoms throughout history have had co-rulers, even if they weren't sprawling empires, and the same goes for governors. Again, I understand this is a Byzantine Empire-oriented DLC, so its content may be locked to that title, but I think there's huge opportunities here to expand those mechanics to enrich every realm. Maybe just make the Byzantines by default have all these features, or make other empires have to earn it with significant costs to restructure their realm in that way. That would be entirely fair. Beyond that, we've got cosmetic stuff and flavor events, both of which are always welcome. Could we get a Revive Hellenism event chain, perhaps? Probably not, since I know the CK3 dev team is kind of moving away from the reverence of Hellenism as a meme faith, but you know, it's pretty easy to revive Hellenism as is, so that's fine. So that's Roads to Power, and again, I'm amazed by the ambition. I have my ideas, some of which I am certain won't make it in, but on concept alone, this DLC is already enough, so I'd be fine to not get all the potential that I see in this DLC. What sucks is that it's coming in quarter 3, so it's gonna be a while before we get this DLC. There's one last piece of Chapter 3 content, which is the event pack, Wandering Nobles. I was actually pleasantly surprised to see that this event pack is more than just events. The previous event packs were pretty meh, with house feuds being still broken to this day, and the Wet Nurse events becoming repetitive within one playthrough. But Wandering Nobles ups the ante with additional lifestyle options and some activities. That's awesome, and quite frankly, if the events added to the game are reduced in quantity or quality, in return for something more interesting like a lifestyle, I'm completely up for it. I don't have a ton to say about Wandering Nobles on account of it being the smallest and furthest away DLC, but I will say that I appreciate the potential roleplay it comes with. Being able to survey the realm, visit monuments, or scour the wilderness is always welcome, given that it's more peacetime content. CK3 at release had a huge problem of lacking anything to do while not at war, and the more stuff like this that gets added, the better. I suspect these little activities will be similar to hunts and feasts in terms of utility, but just different. That is to say that feasts are guaranteed high prestige, hunts are sometimes high prestige with an artifact, and surveys might be another aspect of reward for gold. Same goes for the voyages and wayfaring. I am happy to have more options to spend my time while at peace, and more options to put my gold into, so keep it coming. The same goes for more events. More events means more variety, and therefore more fun. It's all around a good thing. There's not much more to say about Wandering Noble, so we should probably talk about the elephant in the room. The price. So, this is the most expensive chapter yet, sitting at $60 Canadian while being 20% off. That's an undiscounted price of 72 Canadian dollars, which is more expensive than the game itself. Damn. This is a jump from the previous chapters, whose prices I know were cheaper, but since those bundles are no longer available, I actually don't remember what their exact prices were. They sure weren't $60 though. I'll be honest with you. I'm in the privileged position of being a content creator, so it's quite likely I'll get this stuff for free, which is great for me and might leave me feeling disconnected from the larger community, but I'll tell you this too. I'm poor and young. I know what it's like to see something increase in price and be deeply disappointed by it, and I will say, despite most likely not having to pay for this, it hurts to see such a high price. That being said, this does appear to be the most expansive and expensive chapter yet, so it might just be worth the price. I obviously can't attest whether it's worth the money until I actually play this stuff, but I do have a good feeling about the actual design of these DLCs. They seem interesting and fun. They seem to be more than just fluff or numbers. They play strongly into both the role-playing and strategy of the game, at least conceptually, and I do have faith that Paradox will follow through with this concept into an actually fun set of mechanics. Ultimately, even if I weren't a content creator, I know I'd still be buying this stuff, just like I did with every CK2 DLC after the Old Gods. CK3 and EU4 and every other Paradox game are the type of games that, without their DLCs, are simply incomplete games. Have you ever seen the UI on EU4 if you disable all the DLCs? It's horrifying, because so many basic game mechanics are missing. I completely understand being upset with Paradox with that general tactic, which I will say, they've been mitigating with CK3's DLCs, as this game doesn't feel quite so empty without the DLCs, thanks to stuff like culture traditions being around even without Royal Court. Old Paradox would have tied the entire culture system to Royal Court. In terms of pure dollars spent to hours played ratio, I have 2,086 hours in CK3 as of February, and I can easily see these DLCs tacking on another 500 to 750 hours, which means that yeah, I'm getting my money's worth. That's of course not a totally valid way to justify spending money, since it's important that those 500 or so hours are actually fun, but I feel that I do have immense fun with every hour of CK3 I play. Except when I'm doing all achievement speedruns, I'm doing Mother of Us All or Lingua Franca. That makes me hate the game. My point is that you're getting bang for your buck, but I also understand that bucks are an absolute value whose loss is felt in absolute terms, outside of their relation to the entertainment they provide, so you know, I expect a lot of backlash over the price increase. Whatever your position, these DLCs are ambitious and I'm looking forward to checking them out. Follow my Twitch and subscribe here on YouTube so you can see me play these with early access if I am so blessed, Paradox, as to receive your holy embrace of DLC access. Thank you for your time.